we can make an approval based off of a pro forma as far as getting there, where the project right now as it sits may not work cash flow wise. But if there's a pro forma and this is how we're going to do it and this is how we're going to get there, then we can make a loan decision based off that.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. I wanted to do a segment this time for some of the new guys on the investing side. As you know, I'll do anything over 10 units, and most of my stuff is between 20 and 200 units, but I'm getting a lot of calls and a lot of action on smaller assets right now. As interest rates rise, it has a bigger effect on bigger deals, so there's a little bit of a flight to the smaller deals. And so I wanted to bring on Jordan Hagan, who's my go-to guy on some of these assets. He's the director of commercial lending for Radiant Credit Union, and credit unions and banks are whipping butt on some of these big lending institutions right now because they can use the relationships to get better terms, lower interest rates. I've known Jordan now for several years. He's financed a couple of deals I've worked on. Always can reach the guy. He returns texts, calls, emails right away. And that's what you want. Someone who knows what they're doing and they actually return phone calls. Jordan, thanks so much for being on the line, brother. Tell us real quick, what's your specialty? Like, what do you work on? What do you want people to know about you?
Sure. Thank you, Beau. I appreciate you having me. For myself, I've been fortunate. I've been at the same institution for over 20 or right at 20 years.
Which is incredible, by the way. I mean, most lenders are bouncing around.
In this Gainesville market, we do quite a bit of multifamily. We do a lot of student rentals. Commercial real estate is really our bread and butter. We span, I think it's 14 counties now. We go all the way up to Taylor County. We go from East Coast to West Coast and as far as down as Marion County.
Awesome. All right, let's jump into it, man. So I want to do a segment for some new investors. Tell us, what's your dream? Like if a new person came to you and was going to surprise the hell out of you on how organized they were, and they're looking at their first quadruplex, duplex, 10plex, 20plex, whatever it is, what would impress you that they've done before even coming to you? And then let's jump into, what are you looking for from them? What are you looking for in the asset?
As far as for the most part, I think with anybody needs to come. When you're looking at a deal, we want to see that you've done some homework on it. You try to make sure that people aren't doing things emotionally, because a lot of this stuff, it's about, does it make sense? Have you looked at the market? What's the demand?
Probably seen a lot of FOMO in the last couple of years. Everyone wants to get in the game, and sometimes they're bending their own pro formas to make a purchase because everyone else is making a purchase.
Right, exactly. And, it's one of those things when it comes to a deal, what we're looking at first and foremost is, does it make sense? Does the cash flow make sense to go out and do this purchase? Whether or not the current project does or the pro forma does, how are you going to support that pro forma? What have you done to go out there and say, yep, it's undervalued right now? How do you know that? What have you done to go out there and to kind of see what other rents are going for or what the demand is for this unit?
Jordan, perfect. So tell me, when you guys are looking at historical financials, first of all, how many years back do you want? What are you looking for within those numbers? And then how do you determine the loan to value that you're going to put out? Is it based on a pro forma, kind of like a value add, what it's going to be worth in 2 years? Is it just based on historicals? What's the deal on that?
Yeah, historicals tells a lot, not only for us, but it's something that I think the borrowers really need to be looking at, because for the most part, we're wanting to see a trend. What's the trend been? And typically we prefer to have 3 years. We can kind of work with 2, but we're looking for consistency. We're wanting to see, okay, if there was an inconsistent, what happened there, especially if it was expenses, and then that way we can kind of dive that back down. The other part with the borrowers, that's a great place to start when you're putting together pro forma. I mean, if you're going to be making changes, how is that going to be impacting going forward? We can make an approval based off of a pro forma as far as getting there, where the project right now as it sits may not work cash flow wise. But if there's a pro forma and this is how we're going to do it and this is how we're going to get there, then we can make a loan decision based off that.
So Jordan, real quick, in case someone's watching, explain, I know debt coverage ratios are super important to you guys. Explain what that is, what you're looking for in an asset.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And really, when it comes to cash flow, it's kind of a two-headed beast there, as far as that we're looking at the project cash flow to make sure that the primary repayment source has the ability to repay itself. Again, that comes apart with historical. comes a part of the pro forma.
Yep.
Then we also look at a global, which brings into the guarantors, the principal owners. So typically for us, we're looking at anyone that has at least 20% ownership. They're going to be the guarantors of our deal. So we're going to ask for personal tax returns. We're going to ask for tax returns for related entities. Because again, what we're going to do is we're going to look for those cash flow coverages. And for us, typically it's between a 1.2, a 1.5. And how we're getting that is looking at your net income basically divided by annual debt. Globally, we're looking at personal liabilities. You want to make sure that everything, although you personally are not the direct repayment source, but you're not a hindrance on the repayment source, or you don't have other liabilities that's going to be drawing this project negative in order to pay for other things.
Their assets they may own, they're marginal or marginal producers, whatever. An asset they own in a totally different state could bring down the whole ship, if you will, of that particular borrower, which then cascades across the other borrowers. Makes sense. And for those watching, two things. Global means kind of the global personal look on yourself, all the assets you own, any threats that are part of your life, assets or liabilities that could cascade in some way and affect the particular asset you're looking to get borrowed on. A debt coverage ratio for a particular property is the net income divided by the annual debt service. And basically what a bank is looking for there is if you fail and they have to take this property back, they want to know you have enough income coming in after expenses to then service their debt. The debt that they're putting out, they still have to pay their investors on. And so they want to know that this property is healthy enough coming back. What are the things you're looking at in terms of net worth or what makes a quality borrower? Let's just say they were looking at a $800,000 eightplex. What do they need to look like personally in terms of liquidity or cash or net worth in order to even consider them?
For us, and it varies between each financial institution, we have the ability to do finance up to 80% of the purchase price or appraise the value, whichever is less.
That's really strong.
So in any means, you're going to have 20% into the deal. So we want to make sure that, again, wherever we're showing that, whether it's in the business entity that you're borrowing this from or either on the personal side, that we are able to source those funds. And it's not just the down payment, but it's also the estimated closing costs that we can factor in that. Is there a magic number? I don't know, as long as we've got that coverage.
Let me ask you on that note, because I think you're going what I want to ask, which is, let's say the down payment on the deal, this $800,000 deal I'm coming up with. They got to come up with $160,000. Let's call it $175,000 with closing cost. Let's say they've only got another 60, 80 grand to their names. So essentially you as the bank are going to be on the hook for $600,000 and change. Do you look at it from a lending standpoint as, okay, this guy's not super strong individually, so we need to place more weight and make sure that that asset itself is a baller, like that's a good asset. You kind of look at it that way. Whereas flip side is if the guy was super rich, you're more willing to look at a property that's a little riskier long term.
When we do underwriting for the project, we do add in a management fee. We also add in some reserves there to make sure if something were to happen in worst case scenario, whether or not if that person is going to be manage that project themselves. That way, again, worst case scenario, we're having to bring in a management team to manage this property while we're trying to turn it. That expense is accounted into. We also have those built into reserves to kind of help cushion that as well in case something else needs to be addressed within the project. If the deal's a little bit thinner and you have that personal liquidity that's available, it definitely can help mitigate a deal that may be a little bit weaker. That can definitely mitigate that.
And like I said, the flip side is if they're not super strong financially, it just means that the property has to be better equipped to service expenses and debt as you're taking a look at it. Which is a good thing, by the way. I mean, someone with with just enough to get in it can still do this deal as long as the property's on point. Let me ask this last question, man. So I know, having talked to lenders, that there's some things that kind of drive you guys nuts, that slow the process down. What's your biggest thing that you see regularly that can really help things if done properly?
The biggest thing, honestly, is just completing the documentation completely.
That's what I hear all the time, brother.
Some people don't like to be fully transparent when it comes to assets. That's fine. But it's important to complete it as much as possible, to put that information in there. Because again, it is a factoring into the lending decision. Dating, signing personal financial statements, that's a piece to it. But really, going through the list, because what I try to do whenever a borrower contacts me, I try to send them bullet points worth of list of things, items that I need. And if I'm asking for those things, it's really things that I need. It's not, it may not be applicable. It may not be one of those things that in your case, comes up. But if I'm asking for it and it's there, it's something that I need.
Newer investors listening to this, maybe it'll make more sense this way. If you can think about it, lenders are investors. They are investing in you, and even more, they're investing in the property than you are. They're looking at you in this asset just like you're looking at this asset. Withholding information that you don't think is relevant doesn't work for them. These are people who are investing up to 80% of that asset in you. They need to be able to look at everything you own to make sure that there isn't something in your life, your personal life or business, that's going to kind of come back to them and they have to take back the assets. The last thing banks want to do is take back the asset and manage stuff. Don't take their requests, and sometimes repeated requests for items, as them diving in too deep. These are investors like you are. They're just doing their due diligence just like you are. Is that about right?
You hit it on the head. We're your lenders. That's what we want to be. Don't want to be property managers. Not what I signed up for. I want to be your lender. I want to be someone you come to when you find a great deal and that we can help you out and do that. Absolutely. That's who I want to be.
Dude, this has been super, super helpful. How can people reach you?
My cell phone number is 352-318-8303. You can also reach me at jhagan, that's Hagan, at Radiant, CU, like credit union, ORG.
Awesome. And folks listening, I'll put that down in the description of the YouTube video as well. Appreciate your time, brother. And we'll definitely have you on again as we're doing some market updates.
Great. Thank you, Beau. Appreciate it.